Greetings, welcome to another edition of Counterpunch, the show that chronicles the unfolding world communist revolution that we must push back. Please like the show, share the show, and subscribe to EpochTV. 2021, Mark Levin, very good commentator, released a book called American Marxism. And it was a bestseller, and it deserves to be. It's a very good book, but it has one major flaw. Levin's main argument is that the Marxist revolution we're experiencing right now in America is a domestic revolution. It is not driven by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union as it was in the past. This is done by American communists to American people. Now, I got to say, Mr. Levin, that's incorrect. That is one flaw of your book, and it's a very serious thing because if Americans see this as an American-only revolution, they will fail to take account of who is really driving this, and the solutions will not be up to the task. The unfolding US revolution is and always has been influenced by foreign powers. And I want to start with a few examples, to give a few examples of the many I could cite about how these foreign powers have been and still are influencing this country. And I want to start with an older example. I have in my possession a letter from April 1975. It was written by Jorge Terrazas Acevedo, a professor of Chicano studies at the University of California. And Acevedo addresses several prominent Chicano activists. Chicano was the favored word of the Marxists at that time. They included California Communist Party member and leader of the illegal immigration movement, Bert Corona, Arizona Communist Party member Lorenzo Torres, also very heavily involved in the illegal immigration movement, United Farm Workers leader Cesar Chavez, Marxist Dolores Huerta, who got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, Colorado activist Corky Gonzalez, New Mexico land rights activist Reyes Tijerena, and Texas socialist Jose Angel Gutierrez. Now, these were all very prominent activists of the time, all very, very influential in one way or another. And the letter passed on an invitation from the Soviet consulate in San Francisco to these activists, asking them to recruit, if they could, men and women, young men and women, to go to Moscow and train at the Patrice Lumumba School, the School for Third World Revolutionaries, run by the KGB and the Soviet Communist Party. Now, the Soviets assure the correspondents in this letter they seek to support the Chicano self-determination movement. Now, this movement has grown. It's now part of the La Raza, the Mecha consciousness. It's all about splitting the southern states of the United States away from America and returning them to Mexico. They call it Aztlan. So this is a big movement, and the Soviets were backing it, openly backing it. Now, the black community has also been targeted for similar communist separatist plans. In the 1920s, the Communist Party USA, under the direct direction of Joseph Stalin, was advocating for a black socialist republic in the US Southeast. Florida and Tennessee and Georgia and South Carolina were all to be joined together in a black socialist republic, splitting away from the United States. In the 1970s, the radical Black Panther Party, which also had Communist Party members in its ranks, was deeply oriented towards Communist China. They were a Maoist organization, and they sent delegations to China. They looked up to China for leadership. Now, today's Black Lives Matter is the latest iteration in the communist program to split America. Black Lives Matter founders Alicia Garza and Opal Tometi both have ties to a New York-based nonprofit called the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. The RLS trains American activists in socialist technologies and socialist techniques and gives them guidance. The RSL is affiliated to the German Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which is completely funded by the German taxpayer, both the American and German branches, and the Chinese, Russian, and African branches. It's run by a German political party called Die Linke. Die Linke used to be called the East German Communist Party. So you have former East German communists training American activists funded by German taxpayers right now. Die Linke is also part of the Party of the European Left, an alliance of more than 20 communist and socialist parties in the European Parliament, very deeply connected to the European Communist movement. Here is Black Lives Matter movement founder Alicia Garza as part of an American delegation hosted by the Communist Party of Vietnam in 2017. Here is BLM founder Patrisse Cullors mixing with Palestinian radicals back in 2015. At the center of this picture is US delegate Ahmad Abusniad, a Black Lives Matter supporter who is the son of a former senior advisor to Yasser Arafat, the head of the terrorist communist pro-Soviet Palestine Liberation Organization. These CCP connections are ongoing. America's main Marxist-Leninist organization, Communist Party USA, is also completely in bed with the Communist Party of China. The Communist Party USA sends regular delegations to China. They praise China. They take China's side in arguments. They praise China's COVID policy, their international policies, etc. The CCP has members living in China, in Beijing. Here's one of them, a Massachusetts activist named Dylan Walker. The Communist Party USA has close relationships with many US Congress members, including Armed Services Committee members Joe Courtney of Connecticut and Mark Vasey of Texas. Yet if China and the US ever get into a shooting war, and we could see that happen this year, there is no doubt on which side the Communist Party USA will stand. I quote here from a 2010 Communist Party USA memo. The United States government has been committing direct acts of provocation against China's economy and other aspects of its society, including its military. If these confrontations are allowed to become full-blown, it will put the current US military ventures in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere in the shade. And it will demand from all of us, the American communists, new energies to struggle on yet another, perhaps the biggest, domestic front against US imperialism. So these few examples, I think, will confirm the fact that American revolutionaries are deeply tied to foreign communist movements. They're tied to the Communist Party of China. They're tied to the Communist Party of Russia and the Putin regime. They're tied to North Korea. They're tied to the Communist Party of the Philippines. They're tied to Iran. They're tied to Venezuela, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba, to South Africa, and many other members of the World Communist Movement. This is the American Revolution. It's not made in America. It is guided by foreign powers, because these foreign powers understand that the only real impediment left to a world communist regime is a free, independent, constitutional America. So it makes sense that the world communist movement would have its people in the United States, would be working with domestic communist parties to create as much havoc and economic devastation as possible. This is a problem with the book American Marxism. It deals with the problem in America pretty well. It does a good job, but it fails to recognize that there is still an international communist movement guided by China, guided by Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, even Iran, and they are, in America, is still the number one target. Most of the communist movements in this country are working with foreign powers. Though most of them are taking full direction from foreign powers. You know, I used to, when I was in New Zealand, I had a friend who infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party for our security services. And that time, the New Zealand Communist Party, the Socialist Unity Party, was completely subservient to Moscow. My friend John van der Ven would say, you cannot believe the lengths New Zealand communists would go to please their Soviet masters. Their whole existence was about pleasing their Soviet masters. Well, that's the Communist Party USA today with China. That is Democratic Socialists of America with the Sao Paulo Forum. They are working against their own country in the interest of our enemies. There's a word for that. There's a penalty for that. It is actually an offense. I hope you'll more understand that what's happening in America is not driven so much by America, it's driven by foreign powers to take America down. Yes, there are collaborators in our government. Yes, there are collaborators in our communist parties, but it's primarily driven from overseas. So please share the show, like the show, subscribe, and encourage your friends to subscribe to Epoch TV. Keep watching for the next episodes of Counterpunch. God bless America, and God bless everybody who loves freedom. Thank you very much.